Hello, this is Paulette Danny, and I'm back again with a message from the Lord. So, this message that I'm going to be speaking on is another demonic spirit. As I mentioned, I'd be speaking on this week. And this week, the one for this week is the spirit of heaviness. And so when we translate that into a mental disorder, it is depression. So the spirit of heaviness, which when translated into a medical, disorder or mental disorder, it's depression. And so a lot of people don't think of this as a demonic spirit, but it very much is. It is just like the other ones that I mentioned. It is a demonic spirit, and how it works, like the reason why many people suffer from this. It shows up either three ways: either a chemical imbalance in the brain, so a chemical imbalance in the brain. So this is just it's DNA, and this is like an ancestral curse, something that has been passed down from generation to generation. So that is one of the reasons why people suffer with depression or a spirit of heaviness. It is something that they like from a chemical balance or imbalance in their brain. It's something that's been passed on to them, so it's hereditary or ancestral curse, as you would call this. Another reason, again, it would depend on what's going on in the person's life, any kind of trauma, anything that's going on in the person's life that is causing the depression to happen. So various things that are taking place in the person's life, which is causing it. So basically, external factors are causing an individual to experience the spirit of heaviness or depression. And another way is practicing anything in the occult, which will also cause a spirit of heaviness as well. So people don't think of, like I said, they don't think of depression as a demonic spirit because it is more inward. So when you think of, other spirits, which it's attacking other people, then you tend to think of them as, as demonic because it's attacking someone else. But when it's gone more inward, we tend not to think of it as a demonic spirit. And, just you think of it as a medical disorder, which it is, but it is also a demonic spirit as well. And so with this one, so first of all, I'm going to break this one down. So with a spirit of depression, like it's basically, or this, like the spirit, the demonic spirit of heaviness, a spiritual heaviness. And so it's basically oppression. It's basically a form of Satan trying to oppress the individual, to make the person feel like they're in despair, and they're in a hopeless situation, and that there's nothing that they can do to change what it is that's going on in their life. And so this is a perfect way for Satan to get someone in this situation where they feel like there's hopelessness, where they feel like there's despair, where they feel like there's no way out, because once he has you thinking like that, and then he can get into you and work that to his advantage in so many different ways. So what I'm going to talk about, and before I even go into anything, I'm going to read scripture. There's not a lot, or actually I don't really find anything in scripture where it talks about mental illness. I wouldn't be surprised when Jesus was in the world that some of the healings that took place were regarding mental illness, because he did do a lot of deliverance. And anyone that is suffering from the spirit of depression, or I should say, the spirit of heaviness, that is a mental disorder. So, and that is something that would require deliverance. So he did a lot of deliverance. In his time that he was here on earth, he did deliver a lot of people from demonic strongholds that were living in them, or that they, were possessing them. And another thing I also want to mention, actually, I'll wait for that one. But I'm going to go into scripture right now. So this is what I am going to talk about. I'm going to go into Philippians, the classic Philippians 4, and it's 6 and 7. And so let's just go here to Philippians. Let me just keep passing it here just 1 minute. And so I'm using here the NLT version. Okay, so Philippians 4, and it's, 6 and 7. And so don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank him for all he has done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Jesus Christ. So that's the one, don't be anxious about anything, but in everything, don't be anxious about anything, but I know it off heart, but right now, because I'm on here, I went on a blank there. But so this is basically what, this is one way in which God is saying that we can help to alleviate any kind of anxiousness and worries and fears that we are experiencing in our life. But saying this is not going to lift the spirit of heaviness out of someone's life. So I'm going to address a few areas in which people experience the spirit of heaviness. And and basically talk about, ways and which we can deal with this. So the first one, the spirit of heaviness, mental illness, depression, is the temporary depression. So temporary depression, like I said, usually comes from external factors. So usually, and a lot of times, I find, sometimes they're severe. Sometimes, what's going on in your world is real. It could be a very frightening experience that you're going through. It could be a very traumatic experience that you're going through. It could be a very trying experience that you're going through. It could be a trial. There's so many things that can be going on in a person's life that causes them to become depressed. And I'm sure all of us have been there. I'm sure every last person has experienced this kind of temporary depression where something happens in life. It could be the death of a lost one. It could be the breakup of a relationship, the loss of a job, a sickness that comes up. There's so many things that we can't even think of that can happen in a person's life that draws us in, that takes us into a place of depression. And so with the temporary ones, they are temporary, and they are meant, how can I put it? And I did mention some of these losses, which are extreme losses, like the loss of a loved one, the loss of jobs, and then there are so many other things that can go on in one's life that are very unique to the individual that we may not even have experienced. But what can happen when we are dealing with these type of external forms of of depression or a spirit of heaviness is that if we don't look into it at that stage, like if we don't examine exactly what we're going through and how we should deal with this and try to deal with it and try to remedy it, so to speak, at that time, it could take us into a more permanent place. So the important thing is when we're dealing with temporary forms of depression or temporary, like a spirit of heaviness, is to check ourselves. And sometimes it's not easy with some of the things. I'm going to be honest with you. Like I look at my life and I look at the course of my life. And sometimes the things that have caused me to be depressed were things that I had no reason to be depressed about, to be very honest with you. And because there are some things that really, you think about it. I'm just trying to give a really good example. Say the man who's depressed over the breakup of his loser girlfriend, his ex-girlfriend. So his ex-girlfriend, he knew was not the right person for him, but he was in the relationship for such a long period of time that he was in love with her, even though he knew that this person is not the person, like this person is not the kind of person for me. So it ended, and he may even had ended it because of the traits of this individual. But because he loves her, because he's so in love with her, he has gone into a state of depression. And like the woman was wrong for him. She wasn't right for him. He knows that. But he cannot help feeling the way he is feeling about the loss of that relationship. And so it's fine to mourn over these things for a time. That's fine. Loss, we have to allow ourselves to mourn. It is healthy to mourn. There is nothing wrong with mourning the loss of anything that we held dear to us. This is a healthy state. But what can end up happening is that if we do not check ourselves, and if we don't say to ourselves at that period that, okay, like this is kind of like going on a little too long, then that can take us even further into our stage of depression. So at this stage, a lot of things, like at this kind of like external stage where it's a job that you lost, or if you are looking for employment and you're finding a difficult time gaining employment, and as a result, you're dealing with a lot of external factors like bills that are accumulating, and worried about being evicted, and if you have children, worrying about feeding the family. Like there's so many things that can that are going on as a result of of the situation that you're in, and that is causing the depression. But we have to remember that not all things remain the same forever. So everything is temporary. That's why I called it temporary. That's why I called it a temporary, and this is due to external factors. But when we go so much into our heads, when we get so much into our heads, and this is where Satan wants to take us. This is the place where Satan wants to take us. So Satan will tell you that the situation that you are in is not going to change. The situation, what you are going through, God is not going to help you. He's not going to deliver you from this. Look at this. You've been going through this for so long. Everything is just getting worse. Nothing is getting better. And so if you allow that voice, if you allow those voices to become strong, and if you start believing those voices, then that's going to take you into a more severe stage of depression. And so that's where Satan wants to get you. So Satan wants to take a situation that you're going through, a very unpleasant situation that you're going through, of a temporary situation, because life happens. And he wants to breathe in you all the negative things that are going to happen as a result, because it's not changing. So, things are just going to get worse. They're not going to get better. And then, you're going to find yourself on the streets. You and the children maybe the children are going to be taken away from you. And, it just morphs into something bigger than what it is. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a real concern. I'm not saying this is not a concern. I understand this. So this is a real concern, and it is a real reason for you. It's understandable for you to experience this kind of heaviness. I understand that. But at the same time, when we allow the voice of Satan to dictate to us and to tell us that things are just going to get worse and not better, then you steer your life in a different direction. And that's what he wants you to do. He wants you to basically give up on having any kind of hope or believing that there is a chance, that things are going to eventually get better. He wants to make sure that you don't think anything like that, and that you think that your life is just going downhill. So once you agree with him, and once you believe that this is the case, then you're not going to say maybe look for work. You're going to maybe start to let yourself go. You're not going to apply yourself to making yourself better the way you would have if you thought there was hope in you getting out of the situation that you are presently in. So you're going to start believing him, and then once you believe Satan and you believe the lies that he's feeding you, then you're going to start, not believing. You're going to start to make choices that you normally wouldn't have made had you stayed more hopeful. And not only that, you can become more depressed. You want to give up on life. You want to give up on living, all because you now have given up on believing that life will change, and it's for something that is a temporary situation. I remember when I had just graduated college, and I was looking for my first full-time job. And I remember it took 6 months for me to find a job. I wasn't working. I was working throughout, when I was in college, but I wasn't working after college. I wasn't working. And I don't even know why. I'm thinking about it now. I don't even know why I wouldn't get a part-time job, but I didn't. And like I said, throughout college, I worked, and then I wasn't working. And I didn't think about even getting a part-time job. But what I did do is I did summer school. So I took more studies in the summer just to, take up my time, which was a good thing. But I was depressed. I was becoming really, really depressed. And because I didn't have a job, because I was looking for full-time work, office work. And I wasn't finding anything. And it was everything that I was coming up with was you need experience, you need experience, you need experience. And so I became really, really depressed as a result of that. And like I said, eventually 6 months, I did get my first, full-time job working in an office. But it took 6 months, and I was really depressed. And I was praying, because I was a, follower of Jesus Christ. And, like I had a good network of people around me. I was attending church. The people who, I was around, they were very supportive and everything. And my mother was, supportive, everyone around me. Like I had a good network of people around me, but I was still very depressed. And I really thought that I would never, ever find a job. I just thought it was always going to be like this because every job that I applied for said you needed experience. And I said, like, how, and I wanted an office job. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why I didn't apply for part-time, because I was trying to get away from that whole scene. I just wanted something that was full-time, like more career-oriented. And so I just wanted to focus myself on that, as well as, I didn't mind continuing my studies during the summer, because that was also helping me. I was also working towards, like the studies that I was doing was also in preparation for, office work. So I didn't mind that. But it was a very depressing moment. And now I know a lot of people would think that, that was nothing. And in the whole scheme of things, like it was something. Of course it was something, because I needed money. So of course it was something. But I understand. I've lived long enough to know that there are situations that are more dire and more serious than someone looking for employment, especially when that person is living, with their parent. So I know that there are situations that are more dire than that, where, there could, and sometimes even life-threatening. So I understand and I get that. But when we are in that kind of depressive state, we kind of think that what we're going through is something that no one else has gone through, which in many cases, it's not true. So, I finally did get a job. And because I didn't give up, I just kept praying and praying and praying to God. And I kept praying. And, I will never forget, he was the one who did it for me. He was the one who did it. And I had to do a slew. I had to do quite a few interviews and like a slew of tests and everything. Like I had to do typing tests, and like it was just so much involved before actually getting that job. So I got that job. I got the job. But like I said, it took 6 months in order for me to get that job. And it was depressing because, I was very young then, and I didn't know anything else. I didn't understand. But my point is that when we get in these types of situations, we can blow it up to make it seem like it's so much worse than it actually is. And so that's what's the frightening thing about being in a temporary state of depression because of external factors, because of things that are going on in our life externally, like from external forces. And so we think as a result of that, depending if, how we look at it, we can make what we're going through far worse than what it actually is. Because when we're talking about when we're talking about depression due to external factors, due to forces that are taking place outside of us, this is not a depression this is not clinical. This is not a clinical depression. This is not something that's in our DNA. This is something that has resulted from the environment that we are living in. So when we have the power at this point, when we are in a situation like this, to not allow it to overtake our minds and overtake, our thoughts. And that's why that passage that I read to you about, Philippians 4, or Philippians 4, 5, and 6, basically saying that, pray to God, just, take everything to God, submit all your worries and, fears, submit them, hand them over to Him, and He will transform your mind beyond understanding. And, He'll, guarding your heart, guarding your heart and your mind, so that those worries will not seep in to the soul allowing Satan to have his way and then steer you in a direction that is not God's will. And so when we're dealing with any kind of temporary, temporary form of depression, a spirit of oppression, you know, always pray, like for sure, continue to pray about the situation that you're in. And it's also very good to always keep yourself, so always like read your Bible, continue to go to church, continue to have that network of people that you are dealing with, can help keep your spirits up during the time that you're going through. Speak with a pastor, speak with a spiritual consultant, a Christian spiritual consultant who can help you during this time. Listen to sermons on YouTube, get some good Christian books, which will help to elevate your mood and elevate what you're feeling and going through and help give you a positive light and a positive outlook on your life and the direction that it is going in. But also, read other books, like not only Christian books, like fill yourself up with everything Christian. Fill yourself up with everything God. For sure, you do your prayers, you read your books, you do everything that is going to spiritually fill you up so that when Satan tries to attack you and, feeds lies into you about depression or about what you're going through, that you are able to just, fling them away and, just ignore exactly what he's saying. But do that. But also, not only, with all the Christians, but also, exercise, go for walks, find extracurricular activities that's going to help, lift you out of that state of oppression, like spiritual oppression or spiritual heaviness or depression, is going to help have you look at things in a positive light. So it's very important that when we are going through any kind of situation which is like any form of depression or spiritual heaviness that we are going through as a result of external factors, it is always good to read your Bible, just like what I said. Do. And I'm going to actually even give you another example, because when I mentioned, about things, I mentioned about like more serious, things that can put a person into depression, things like the loss of a loved one, of, like serious loss. I think about Moses. So I think about Moses when Moses died. Now I'm going to actually go into this one. So when Moses died, the people of Israel mourned Moses for 30 days. So that was the custom. That in the biblical times, that when somebody died, you mourn them for 30 days. So you actually, had that time, that you had, set to mourn them for 30 days. Then after the 30 days, life went on. Now, of course, after the 30 days, that doesn't mean you stop missing them. That doesn't mean you stop mourning them. But it is a lesson for us today. That is a lesson for us today, that there is a period where you actually mourn whatever it is you lost. There is that time where you actually feel that kind of pity for yourself. When they say you have a pity party, there's nothing wrong with having a pity party. Absolutely nothing wrong with having a pity party. But like all parties, they end. They should end. Just like when you go out to a party, any kind of social event, they have their time, 1 hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, whatever, but it ends at some point. And when it ends, you go home. That does not mean that you forget the party that you attended, but the party is over and life goes on. Now, like I said, there's nothing wrong with us having pity parties for ourselves. But if we're going to stay in that party of pity, then it becomes a problem. So it's a matter of, yes, we are going through something, and we're not going to lie to ourselves and pretend that we are not going through something. So we are going to process what it is that we are going through. We need to process this. We need to talk to God about this. We need, to flesh this out so that He can then work with us on getting over it, or on overcoming what it is that we are going through. And so, but at some point, the party, the pity, it has to end, and we have to pick up from where we are, and we have to continue moving. And so that's when we continue our walk with God and continue to ask God to give us the grace, to give us the strength to continue to move on the way He wants us to move. And, sometimes we're not going to be out of those situations in 30 days or in 3 months. But that doesn't mean that just because we are still in a situation which is unpleasant, and that we don't like, and which is depressing or oppressive, or you feel that spirit of heaviness, that doesn't mean we get that right to stay there. Now, I digress, because I am going to come to what I was talking about with Moses, and about that 30-day window in which the people of Israel had to actually be in a state of mourning for somebody when they lost them. But then after that, life went on. Yes, they missed them. Of course they missed them. They didn't stop missing them just because it's 31 days and that whole mourning point, is gone. Of course they still miss them. And a year later, they're going to probably miss them. But life has to continue, because, with the loss of anything, yes, it's been lost. But you're still here. You're still here. So God didn't intend any of us to wallow in our misery just because it exists. He still wants us to move and to do and to live. Because if He wanted us in that place of wallowing, then maybe, he would have maybe taken us with us, because He doesn't want us like that. Like, He doesn't want us in that kind of negative state. And so, like, for example, with, the person who was no longer in the world, that was their time. And, God created us all. So, He can choose when it's time for someone to go. But we are still here, and I'm just using that as an example, but whatever we're going through, we're still here, whatever we're going through. So we have to live through it. We have to live through what we're going through, and we have to grow and learn what it is that we are experiencing and what it is we're going through. And we have to learn how to navigate and how to overcome whatever it is. Because if whatever it is we're going through, God has allowed us to go through it. And it obviously is for a very good reason. And in most cases, it is to help make us better. In all cases, like some things, of course, that we go through, God never planned for us to go through, but He makes it work. Whatever it is that we're going through, it works out in our favor. So, digressed hugely. I am going to get back to what I was saying about the 30 days, and that we have to move on with our lives, at some point. So after the children of, the children of children of Israel, they mourned Moses' death for 30 days. This is what God says to the person who He has instilled to take over, who was Joshua. I could say it, I can, but I'm going to read it. I think it's far more powerful for me to actually read this. And so this is what God says to Joshua after the 30 days. And so we're going to Joshua 1, and I'm going to just keep reading. After the death of Moses, the Lord's servant, the Lord spoke to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' assistant. He said, Moses, my servant is dead. Therefore, the time has come for you to lead these people, the Israelites, across the Jordan River into the land I am giving them. I promise you what I promised Moses. Wherever you set foot, you will be on the land I've given you. From the Negev wilderness to the south, to the Lebanon mountains, to the north. I'm not going to go into that. My point was, God made it very clear to Joshua, after the 30 days, my servant is dead. Continue to move. He's dead, he's gone, but you're not dead. Continue moving, continue walking, continue going to the promised land that I have for you. And so that mourning period was there, which God respected, and he had that there for them. But at some point, you have to keep moving. At some point, you have to say, okay, yes,